So guys, if you've been here before, welcome. Don't know what I'm saying. Right. Today's spooky improv story is called Bat Hide because I did a random word generator and I got the words bat and hide and I couldn't decide between them. And hide has two meanings, hide from something or hide as in animal skin, so bat hide, why not? So guys, today I'm doing an improv story called Bat Hide. Thank you very much. Right. So, once upon a time, there was a little boy called Terry. Now, Terry was easily scared, and when it got to dusk in the, like evening time when the suns are going down, I think that's called dusk. I don't know the difference between dusk and dawn. I know one's the sun going up and the other's going down, but I can't remember which is which. When the sun's going down and it gets all like dark and orangey in the skyline, that's when the bats start to come out. And with Terry being easily scared, he's not really a big fan of the bats. He doesn't like when they flap by the window because they frighten him, and he's scared that they're gonna suck his blood because, bats are what inspired the design of vampires. So one day, Terry had an idea to overcome his fear, and he decided to make a trip to the nearby graveyard. On his way to the graveyard, he felt a chill down his spine, and it wasn't just because it was winter and he was wearing a very thin polyurethane jacket. Is that the right word? He's wearing a very thin polystyrene jacket. I think polyurethane is something else. He's wearing a very thin polystyrene jacket. He was very cold. He was shivering and rubbing his arms to keep himself warm. When he eventually arrived at the graveyard, and the graveyard looked as all graveyards do, gravestones, grass, Michael Jackson conkers, and it was actually quite nice and atmospheric. But Terry looked up in the trees and he noticed that there were a bunch of bats flying around. He cowered in his hands and he was frightened and screamed, "Mom, help!" But then he realised to himself, he was like, I need to stop being such a wuss. I need to get over my fear. Bats aren't bad at all. They don't even, drink blood other than blood bats. I think blood bats is a thing. So what he did was, he went up to one of the trees that had branches that were easily reachable for him. And he started to climb the tree. Bit by bit, he climbed up the tree until he was about eye distance, like eye level, with some of the bats that were hanging from the trees. He was frightened still, but he was slowly overcoming his fear when he realised how cute the bats looked. They looked like little dogs with wings, or little cats with wings, like a mixture of cat and dog with wing. And weirdly, he felt the need to stroke one. He looked in its eyes and it looked back at him with its glowing little red beady eyes. And he couldn't help but feel enticed to reach his hand out and gently stroke it on its cheek. But as he did so, the bat took a big bite out of his finger, and Terry screamed and fell out of the tree, hurtling towards the ground. When Terry woke up, everything was black. He didn't know where he was or what happened since he fell. All of a sudden he heard a "ee" as a door in front of him swung open, and it was a very strange shaped door that he'd not seen before. All of a sudden he was thrust forward in a sitting upwards position, and he looked around the room and everything was upside down except for him, and he was very confused. He He looked around him and all he could see was bats hanging from the ceiling. And there were chairs hanging from the ceiling, even a dining set hanging from the ceiling, because he was in a big dining hall. It looked like a big Dimitrescu castle-inspired room with a fireplace, vases, like ammo. That's a joke, but it looked so regal, it was beautiful. But he was confused how he ended up there and where he was. He looked at himself and he noticed that he was in some weird gothic attire and that his hands were crossed over his chest. He suddenly uncrossed his arms and walked forward and looked back. And he realised that he'd just come out of a coffin that was leaning against the wall. He was extremely confused at this point how he even ended up in there. He looked around and said, "Hello? Anyone in here? Here? Because it was a big castle, there was a lot of reverb. "My name is Terry. Is anyone here? Here? No one came to see him. He was very confused how such a big castle could have no one around. Eventually he went up to the fireplace to see if he could warm himself up because he was still very cold from being outside. The second he approached the fire, his skin started to burn. Ah! Fuck! He ran away from the fire because he was confused. He didn't realise his skin was so sensitive. He looked at his arm and it was all ashy where the fire had been warming him up. He brushed it away and part of his arm was falling off and turning into ash. He didn't know what to do. He thought he had some weird skin condition or something, or that it was just some kind of weird illusion. Eventually, two of the bats that were on the ceiling drifted down very gracefully and landed in front of him, and in a whoosh they turned into a man and a woman. Terry gasped and bashed into the wall behind him in surprise. "Who are you two? How did you turn it?" "Shh," the woman said. "Don't worry, my darling. You're safe with us now." "What are you talking about?" said Terry. "I was going for a walk, and how did I end up here?" "Shush now, child," the man screeched. "You're with us now. You are one of our kind." Terry suddenly realised what was going on. "You guys are vampires, aren't you?" The man and the woman looked at each other, and they looked back at Terry and they let out a howl of laughter. "Now you're a vampire?" said the woman, in a very condescending tone. "Darling, you are always a vampire." Terry was extremely confused at this point because he'd always been afraid of bats, and he's been in the sunshine before. "What are you talking about? I wasn't a vampire before. Turn me back into a human. What have you done to me?" Darling, we are your great-great-great-great-grandparents. And we came here to tell you that you only grow your fangs and your exposure to sunlight at a certain age. It was your birthday today, wasn't it? Terry looked at the clock and realised that it was midnight. "Oh gosh, yeah, I guess it is my birthday. I'm 11 now." "Yes, you see, when every vampire is 11 years old, they start to gain certain qualities that are more vampire-esque." Terry didn't know what to do with himself. He felt quite taken aback, as I feel like, anyone would if they realised that they'd just become a vampire. "Hush now, darling, don't worry. You're safe with us. And look, now you can overcome your fear of bats. And here, we have a special gift for you, darling." The great-great-great-great-great-grandfather man vampire suddenly brought over a present to Terry. "Here you go, my child." Terry was as sad and confused as he was, undid the ribbon, opened the box, And what do you know? It was a lovely leather jacket made from bat hide. Here, darling, put this on. It'll help keep you warm. I can see you're shivering. Terry put the jacket on and sniffed because he was crying a little bit. Thanks. So, I don't really know what to do with myself now. What do I do? Darling. The lady vampire wrapped her wing around Terry. We fly. Suddenly, the ceiling opened up and all the bats flew into the sky on the moonlit night. Terry and his great-great-great-great-grandparents picked Terry up and flew into the moonlight. Terry screamed at first, but then he screamed with joy and he was having so much fun. And he flew into the moonlight with all the rest of the bats and his great-great-great-grandparents. And he overcame his fear of bats. The end. That was such a wholesome story. I didn't mean for it to be that wholesome, but I liked that story. But thank you for listening, guys. I appreciate y'all. Thank you. Thank you guys very much. Thank you. And you want to know how I know that's a real story? Because I was one of the bats that made the bat hide jacket. That was a nasty ordeal. I had to skin a few of my friends to make that jacket, so sorry Jordan and Derek. Your family will miss you, I'm sure, but at least we made Terry happy. That's all that matters really at the end of the day.